So more than a year ago, I made a video titled "Can you make a game without code?" in which a younger, much more naive me detailed some of the software suites out there that promise to let you turn your dream narrative game into a reality without having to compile a single function, whatever that means. But you know what? All this time later, I'm here to tell you that it actually turns out, yes, you can make a game without coding. And you know what? Visual scripting is pretty amazing. In fact, I think it's a pretty incredible time to be alive when you can legitimately talk about making a whole proper game without having to write a single line of code. And today I want to talk about how I've discovered a kind of symbiosis and an almost mindful state of zen with this limitless grid and these little boxes. Welcome back to the Point and Click Devlog, an ongoing series in which 4,000 coloured arrows are my new best friends. So since starting work on my game, which if you're new here is an old school 2D point and click adventure game, and since documenting the process on this channel, I've made no secret of the fact that I don't know how to code, and I really don't know how to code. I've always found that a lot of people online will say that they don't know how to code, and what they really mean is that they could probably build you an app quite easily, but probably not GTA 5. Whereas I genuinely do not know how to code at all. And that's not for a lack of trying. In the past, I've tried a couple of avenues to learn. 2 or 3 years ago, I completed a few modules of the quite brilliant Swift Playgrounds on iOS, which is designed to teach literal children how to code in Apple's programming language. Then at some other juncture, I installed Game Maker Studio and followed along with a bunch of tutorials, even getting to the point of having something that resembled a computer game up and running. But in both cases, there was a pretty big problem. I was able to do what was asked of me or follow the requisite directions, but I had absolutely no idea why the things I was typing did the things they did. Like, I can follow the directions to make the gravity higher or lower on a basic platform game, but I can't quite grasp how those lines of code transfer into gameplay. So I found it impossible to start riffing and making my own code because I've never been able to grasp why some typed out gibberish makes things like this. That synaptic step from what to why has always just seemed to be too big a leap for my poor old brain to handle. So when people started telling me that the $70 Adventure Creator plugin for Unity would allow me to do everything I needed to in my game without having to write any code at all, I was obviously skeptical. Because I've been sold this dream before. Game Maker Studio has a visual scripting option baked in, for instance, but I found that to be more like trying to build a Ferrari out of Lego bricks, and I couldn't get to grips with it. I know that Unreal Engine also has its blueprint system for visual scripting, and maybe that's great, but all my experience prior to using Adventure Creator was that it's naive to imagine that you can put together a game without having to regularly fire up a code editor and give it a bit of this. Because why should you be able to? Just put in the work and learn how to code, you lazy idiot. But yeah, Adventure Creator is actually different, and it's unlocked a unique kind of game dev workflow that the perfectionist in me finds very satisfying. So for the uninitiated, Adventure Creator sits over the top of Unity and presents you with a menu for just about everything you could ever think to need in a narrative-driven game, 2D or 3D. That menu gives you a bunch of different but fairly straightforward ways to create what's called an action list. And an action list is the bread and butter of every single thing that you'll need to put together in your game. Like, your protagonist needs to talk to an NPC, action list. Change from one room to another, action list. Pick up an item, action list. Everything you need to make happen for the player is done the same way, through a series of simple drop-down lists. Now, if you want a quick example, no worries, come with me. Open up a new action list, and this is what you'll be greeted with, this endless, limitless, grayscale plane in which to build things out. So let's say that the player has clicked on something and that makes the protagonist grab an item and then say something witty. Well, that's pretty straightforward. We've just got to take each thing in turn. So that's play the character's grab animation, then remove the sprite from the scene. You can either make it invisible or teleport it off screen, it's up to you. Then remove the hotspot for that item so that you can't repeat the action, and then add the item to your inventory, and then select dialogue, play a line and type something witty, I guess. And that's it, pretty much. If you dock this screen on a second monitor, you can even see those things firing as the engine runs through them. And so, while that example is a very simple version of what an action list can become, that hopefully gives you an idea of the basics. But what's cool, and why I really wanted to make this video, is that since I've got to grips with this way of working, I've come to find this big grey grid to be quite a calming space. And I wonder if that's how people who naturally take to traditional programming feel about their workspace too. I think what really flicked that switch in my head was when I started to approach the dialogue options for each NPC across the whole game as one big block of work. Like, for each NPC in the game, there will obviously be multiple dialogue options to choose from, but those options will also change as you progress through the game based on what's happening in the story, or what items you're carrying, or a bunch of other things. So when you first think about putting that together, it can seem quite daunting, but I found that there is some genuine joy to be had in pouring a coffee, expanding this little grey space to full screen, and being super methodical about it all. And because the canvas is infinite, it makes organising these little boxes and their myriad arrows a zen-like process, a bit like tending to a garden or organising paperwork in a filing cabinet, if that floats your boat. Like, this dialogue option leads to this conversation, which we'll put all the way over here. We'll build that out, and then we can just collapse all the boxes and neaten things up. Then we'll continue with the rest of the options down here and rinse and repeat. Once everything's written out, we can tidy the whole thing up so that it becomes less of a scary web of visual code and more a mini work of art that you're the master and commander of. And then that's all the dialogue you'll have with that character done and ticked off for the entire game, and it's all in one self-contained place. Maybe I'm weird, but I find that really satisfying. And it's also really powerful. You can run multiple actions at once with specific timings to play X sound when Y happens, or you can have an action to run a separate action list within an action list, or check a variable that allows other options elsewhere in the game to happen. And again, that sounds complex, but as a visual learner, I found this workflow to be so much more intuitive than any of my ill-fated forays into coding ever did. And again, for troubleshooting purposes, you can even have this screen open whilst you play the game, and you'll see each action fire as they happen. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, if you want to make a game but you don't know how to code, you can. There is help. And you know what? Because all of this just sits over Unity, I reckon you could use this really powerful, user-friendly functionality to make more than just a narrative-driven adventure game. I think you could probably even cherry-pick some of this functionality to make an RPG, or even a platformer, using only action lists to define everything aside from your core player movement. I suppose what I'm saying is, I know that there are tools that do similar things out there, but Adventure Creator is the only suite I've ever used that has made me, as a bit of a tech moron, feel confident and calm and empowered to actually achieve what I'm trying to achieve. Or, in other words, I've discovered the joy of visual scripting, and I wanted to let people know that it's not only possible to make a game without coding, it's actually pretty enjoyable. So look, if that sounds like something you need in your life, I've actually got a video on this channel that acts as a long introductory tutorial to the platform, where I'm going in blind and being taught by the one-man team behind the upcoming modern classic of the genre, Dexter Stardust. So I will stick a link to that in the description. We've also got an Adventure Creator help and support room in this channel's community Discord server, so feel free to join that if you want to share in the visual scripting fun, or just to get a little bit of help as and when you need it. Hopefully I will see you there. If not, no worries, just make sure, whatever you do, that you do not subscribe to this channel or like the video, because I hear that YouTube really hates that stuff. Bye.